Good afternoon. Oh, wow, that was quick. All right. Welcome to the first in-person First Friday luncheon in about 3 years. So, welcome. I am Norman Ferguson, Director of Veterans Services for the University of St. Thomas, and it is my pleasure to be with you today. Our discussion today is one of deep importance, which is how to create an environment where veterans can thrive as members of your organization. Our new president, Rob Vischer, talks frequently about building a culture of encounter, one where we are called to engage with others in meaningful ways because we believe in the basic human dignity of all people. Now that I've mentioned President Vischer, and speaking of firsts, he is now the official president of St. Thomas. And this is one of his first opportunities to talk with a First Friday audience. It's been an eventful few months for him and for St. Thomas, and I know he is excited to give you some brief updates before lunch is served. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming President Rob Vischer.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to be able to get back together in person for First Friday, and we're glad that you've taken time out of your day to join us. As you probably know, there is a lot going on at St. Thomas. We are on a journey from being a small Catholic liberal arts college to being a comprehensive, nationally known university. And this is one of the most exciting chapters of that journey as we leverage our Division I athletics to more national visibility, as we continue with plans to build the Lee and Penny Anderson Arena on South Campus right next to the new Schoenecker Center, which you can see on your way out just across Summit Avenue. There is a ton going on. But one thing that we always want to keep in mind at St. Thomas, as a Catholic university, we take vocation seriously, right? What that means is every student who steps onto our campus, we want to walk alongside them and support them as they discern how their gifts and values and priorities and life experience coalesce together to meet the world's needs, right? That's vocation. It is accessible and it's an invitation to everybody. Now, if we take vocation seriously for our students, it means we also have to take it seriously for ourselves as an institution. So how do our strengths, resources, expertise, history, traditions at St. Thomas align with the world's needs today and into the future? Those needs look different today than they did in 1885 when we opened our doors. So what is that going to look like? Well, let me give you one example. We started our first cadet program supporting the military in 1903, right, 120 years ago. Several years ago, a group of student veterans came to us and explained how their needs and the challenges of veteran populations required some different types of support from the general student population. So at that point, university leadership, reflecting on our history, this long tradition of a cadet program, and our resources and expertise could combine to position us to really lean in a pressing need that our world experiences today. So we are committed and we are executing a vision of being the most veteran-friendly school in our region. We are already ranked among the most veteran-friendly schools in the nation. This fall, I had the pleasure of presiding at a dedication ceremony for our new Karen Veterans Resource Center that's doing unbelievable work under Norman Ferguson's leadership in our veteran community. This is an example of vocation. How do institutions, how do individuals, how do communities figure out what we have to offer the world, be connected enough with the world to know where the need is, and then lean in. And in the area of support for veteran students, we are honored to be of service to those who have served our country, and that will be at the heart of our vocation for many years to come. So thanks for joining us for this really important conversation today. And I'm going to invite up our Director of Campus Ministry and a former Air Force chaplain, Father Larry Blake.
Thank you, President Fisher. It's wonderful to be here with you this afternoon, and as a veteran myself, I'm very proud of the work that our university does for those who have served our country. I invite you to join me in this time of prayer. Most gracious and loving God, we gather today mindful of the many blessings you have bestowed on us and on this, our campus community. We are grateful for the leaders in this room and those throughout the nation and world who strive to live lives of abundant faith, steadfast hope, and undying love to promote the common good. Well, God, may we realize ever more deeply that our education, our prosperity, and our influence are both privileges and responsibilities to be used to build a more peaceful and just world, particularly among the most vulnerable. May our vision, our vocation, our purpose be strengthened by your grace. And today, oh God, we ask you to bless this University of St. Thomas community. Bless in a special way our panelists today who have done so much to better the lives of veterans. We ask you to bless the food that we are about to enjoy and those who have prepared it. May we be nourished to lead with fidelity and with excellence, mindful that it is through your Son and by his grace that we are redeemed. We ask all of these things this afternoon in your most holy and gracious name. Amen.
As you are finishing lunch, we're going to start with our program today. Before we begin, I would like to invite you to visit the Paul and Sarah Karen Veterans Resource Center in Murray Herrick Hall. That office is the heart of St. Thomas's service to our veteran students. We provide supports like academic and career counseling, study groups, opportunities for volunteer service, and organize special events during the year. We are continually looking at ways to enhance our services, and if you want to learn more, we would love to meet you. Please feel free to connect with me after today's program. I would like to introduce Dr. Karen Lange, the Vice President of Student Affairs, who will be our moderator. Dr. Lange is a wonderful supporter of our veteran students, and it is a pleasure to work with her. She has served as the Vice President for Student Affairs since 2015 and has worked in Student Affairs at St. Thomas for over 35 years, including 15 years as the Dean of Students prior to becoming Vice President. In her role as Vice President, Karen oversees co-curricular student engagement on campus, as well as many of the services for students, including the Paul and Sarah Karen Veterans Resource Center. May I introduce Dr. Karen Lange.
Check. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you, Norman, and good afternoon to all of you. As Norman said, it's great to be back in person again and to see all of you here. Thank you for supporting our students, and thank you for supporting St. Thomas. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to Russ Becker and Greg Fredlund. Russ Becker is Chief Executive Officer. Yes, thank you. How nice, they get a clap before they even start.
We haven't spoke yet. I mean, you might want to take that back.
So Russ Becker is Chief Executive Officer and President of API Group. I see a lot of your staff here today. It's nice to meet so many of you. After graduation from Michigan Tech University with his Bachelor and Master of Science degrees in civil engineering, Russ began his career as a field engineer with Cherney Contracting. He moved on to become a project manager for Ryan Companies during the construction of the Greenfield Recycled Paper Mill project for Liberty Paper. Upon completion of this project, he joined API's group subsidiary, the Jamar Company, in Duluth, Minnesota. Russ started as manager of construction and was named president in 1998, where he served until joining API Group in 2002. So welcome, Russ. We're happy to have you here. Next, I'd like to introduce Greg Fredlund. He's president of Northland Constructors, an API Group company, an infrastructure services provider that operates across the Midwest. Greg is a graduate of St. Thomas, 2006, and he completed the University of Minnesota Army's ROTC program while attending St. Thomas. He served in the U.S. Army from 2006 to 2011 and completed his service as the rank of captain. Upon leaving the Army, Greg was selected into API Group's Leadership Development Program. This program is part of API Group's Veteran Hiring Initiative, which we're going to hear more about today. The Leadership Development Program provides year-long business training experience at 8 different API Group companies across the country. After the leadership program, he was operations manager and later president of NYCO, an API Group company of the Twin Cities. Then in 2019, Greg was named president at Northland. Greg, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Karen.
Yes. We're so honored to have both of you with us today. So, Greg, I'm going to start with you. So tell us a little bit about your military service and moving into your career after the Army.
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to say it's an honor to be here today. Just asked to come back to the campus and talk and in this capacity, so really thank you everyone. So we already kind of covered ROTC, but I got to do Army ROTC in college, and there was a lot of opportunity there too. I got to go to airborne school, it was parachutist school, so during college I got to go jump out of airplanes, and I got to go to air assault school, which was a rappel school, so, and then just with the cadet battalion at the University of Minnesota, there was just a lot of cool opportunities there too. My military career was fast. It was nearly 5 years from 2006 to 2011. Quite a wild ride. So I decided I wanted to be an armor officer, which I usually introduce as a tank officer because that's just more commonly known. So I probably watched Patton too much or something like that growing up, and it stuck. But then that was kind of the start in my direction. So I went to maneuver officer basic course, where I learned to be essentially tactics and a tank platoon leader. And then it was really off to the races after that. So my first duty station was Fort Stewart, Georgia with the 3rd Infantry Division. I'd say I was there for about a month or so in processing, and my unit, 164 Armor, had already gone to Iraq. So went quick, and then I was on a plane to Baghdad, and I took over a platoon in Baghdad after being there for about a week. And it was just incredible, and that was my first real leadership challenge, probably at 23, and they were just incredible people. I just had the best platoon and the best guys there. So after that, it was fast. I was home for a year in between deployments. I returned to northern Iraq for a year. At that point, I was on battalion staff, some more in operations. And then I'd kind of met the love of my life and decided to, get out and start a family. And so 2011, I got out, and I lucky to come across API Group. I met API Group at a hiring convention. Very talented guy named Mike Shands, our learning and development department. And then I interviewed with Russ. And Russ let me
snuck
into
by.
Russ let me into the LDP, and then I've been at API Group ever since, and it's been just awesome. So,
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for sharing your story with us. So, Russ, can you tell us a little bit more about how API has developed its commitment to veterans?
Yes. So it starts with a gentleman by the name of Lee Anderson, and we're sitting in the Anderson Student Center, and Lee and Penny Anderson were formerly the majority shareholders of API. And so I've worked directly for Lee since 2002, and proud to be able to say he was a mentor to me, and really did a lot for me and my family and where I'm at in my career today. But back in the period of time following the Great Recession, it was 2008 probably, maybe 2009, veteran unemployment rates were at all-time highs. And Lee was a West Point graduate, and so a military veteran himself, and it really, he really struggled with it. And basically couldn't understand why, people weren't hiring veterans, and, really was getting frustrated that we weren't hiring veterans. And so basically I went to our businesses and I said, I have a request. And I said, I want you to hire just one veteran. And then at API, what becomes important to, so to speak, the leadership becomes important to everybody. And we started to track it on a quarterly basis, and really started to see positive growth in veterans as well as veteran spouses. And we've always had an emphasis on military spouses and the sacrifices that they make in support of their spouses when they're serving. So it just really was that simple. I'd love to tell you that it was really super strategic. It was just that there was a significant need. They are unbelievably great teammates, hardworking, loyal. And in today's world, to be able to use the word loyal with such conviction, I think speaks a great deal to the men and the women who have served our country, and they're just great people to have on the team. But that's how it started, and the leadership development program, that's a whole nother conversation.
Thank you, Russ. And of course, Lee and Penny are such great friends at the university. We appreciate all they've done for us also. So Greg, as a veteran, can you tell us what unique skills your brothers and sisters in the armed services can bring to their civilian careers? We just heard some of them from Russ, but if you want to expand on that a little bit.
yeah, for sure. I would always tell veterans to be proud of your skills. I would really stack veterans up to age group peers, they're set up for success based on the skills they got in the military. So I don't know who all is in the audience exactly, but if you're somebody that can hire veterans, I guess I want to kind of make the case there, right? So I think what you're getting is a really mission-focused person, driven, strong-willed. I think they come with a value set, like in the Army, for instance, selfless service was one of our values, and what better, type of concept of selflessness than to have in business or the outside world. So I also think just, organizationally, like the Army was a super lean and standardized. So when we think of business, there's a lot of skills there. And then from a leadership standpoint, just, people that come with experience and, kind of been stress tested and been through some challenges, that just might be a veteran you meet. So I encourage you, to think about veterans and if you are a veteran, be proud of your service. So there's a lot there, and don't forget it. I'm still using it every day, what I learned in the service. So.
Thank you, Greg. Russ, you talked a little bit about some of the qualities you see. Is there anything else you want to add from your perspective as someone who hires veterans?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think Greg did a better job describing their positive attributes than I did, and I think he's right on the mark. And the only other thing, and this is meant to be a compliment, not something that's negative, but they're grinders, and they can grind. And you know, in business, you know, not every job, you know, so to speak, is as flashy as say mine or as flashy as Greg's. And you need people that can grind through tasks and deliver results. And the level of perseverance that veterans have is really quite incredible.
Thank you. And Greg, I heard you talk a little bit to the audience, knowing there's some employers out here. And Russ, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what incentives or benefits are available to businesses that hire veterans?
Well, I think someplace we have a list of different places where we actually recruit, you know, veterans and hire veterans through different career fairs and different opportunities from that standpoint. But like one of the best examples, we have a gentleman, his name's Alan Crabtree. He works in our business in New York. He actually took the harder route to officership in the U.S. Army. He started off as an enlisted individual and worked his way up through the ranks. And we actually hired him into our leadership development program. And Alan is really providing kind of leader development, learning development, some talent acquisition inside this particular business of ours. And so this is a testament to him, and this is a testament to some of the services that you can take advantage of if you're an employer. But Alan, so we're in the fire life safety space, and one of the shortages that we have for technicians is fire alarm technicians. And Alan created an accredited apprenticeship program that has been approved by the state of New York. And then he went so far as the U.S. Army has, I'm going to call it an internship type program, where basically as men and women are transitioning out of the service, the U.S. Army will pay their wages for 6 months, and your business can take that person on and, so to speak, have a 6-month interview with them, and they get to have a 6-month interview with you, and they can decide if they like, you know, so to speak, the fire space, or if they don't like the fire space, or they don't like the company. They have a choice in it, just like we have a choice in whether we think that person, you know, is going to fit our company and our culture and what we're trying to accomplish. And there's just a myriad of different programs that are like that, but I can't think of a better way in a world that's constricted with skilled talent, that the Army gives you a 6-month interview, and they pay it, and you're training them, and you're developing them, and you're growing them, and you get through the other side of it, and you have a really good employee that can be productive from day one that you start paying them. It's a great program.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Greg, the transition that veterans make into civilian life is a theme we've often heard about, and sometimes we dwell on the difficulties of that. Can you talk a little bit about the specifics and maybe share some positive things to make the transition successful?
Sure, yeah. And this is one of the more personal questions, I think, in how I was thinking about it. So, one, for me, you know, it was really to have an advocate or a mentor. So, you know, to have people in your life like that. So you encounter people like Russ. My first boss, Rick, was just like the most amazing person for that. Second boss, Jim. They were just great at just like totally giving of themselves and giving their time to make me better. So from a transition standpoint, a veteran, you know, getting out of the service and taking on a civilian career, that's very important to have an advocate, someone in your corner, and be on the lookout for those people and be listening. Second thing was just an organization that gets you. Like, by the time I got in the API group, there's already a veteran history. Mr. Anderson was a veteran, and they understood, you know, us as veterans. So I thought that was very important, because you wouldn't want to be a fish out of water, exactly. And then lastly, you know, this was, I think, the most important for me, was when you get in your head that you're going to do something when you're 17 or 18, and then you do it for the next 10 years, you know, that's kind of like this higher calling. And then the military is so all-encompassing, it becomes you, right? It's your personality. So, you know, when you get out, for me, it was really important, in addition to like your family and your friends and your faith, but like, what's your work life going to do for you? Exactly. And for me, you know, and it was listening and kind of sensing around me and listening to wise people, but it's about the people at your business and taking care of them, and protecting their livelihoods and making good decisions for them. And that really became kind of like my new like calling. It's the people around you and taking care of them. And like Russ would always say, like API first, and that kind of embodies that the business is so important because it's all of us. And so I always took that on as leader, and that helped me transition and find that purpose. So
That's awesome. Thank you, Greg. Russ, API Group has a program called Veterans Rotational. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program and how it was developed?
And that program is different than the program that Greg went through and graduated from. So our Veterans Rotation Program was really quite simply a way for us to facilitate the hiring of veterans and really salt our businesses with really talented people. And we actually have a number of different programs for hiring folks. We have the ERP, which is just the Employee Rotation Program, which basically means if I find somebody that's really talented, we hire them. And typically what we've done is we've rotated those. So in the Veterans Rotation Program, we'll hire a veteran. We'll put them in one of our, typically it's been local businesses. When I say local, it's our Minnesota companies. We'll have them rotate and spend 3 months in that business. Okay. And it's kind of in this whole idea of this internship. And they'll go there and they'll spend 3 months there, try out that business. The business gets to try them out. If there's a connection right away, they just stay there. If there's not a connection, we send them to another business. And they work for 3 months, you know, and they'll try that business out, and the business tries them out. And if there's a connection, they stay. And so we just rotate them around, and we fund all of that from API Group, from the parent company, so that there's no expense or no financial burden on the companies. And so our business leaders, you know, these are smart people, and they figured out, hey, there's a free resource for me that's coming. I get to have a 3-month interview with them. What could be even better? And they figure out ways to put them to work, and it's just been a good way for us to add talent to the organization. And you know, like we put our business leaders they're under pressure to deliver results, and so it's like I don't want to hear, well, I can't afford it. I don't have the overhead to do it, and so we just fund it at the parent company, and it takes care of itself.
Excellent, thank you. Greg, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how St. Thomas prepared you for your career, both in the military and your career now?
yeah, no, and it was you know, St. Thomas is just a great place to go to school. I lived on campus all 4 years here, so I was in Ireland for 2 years, and we've been having some discussions before talking about campus and stuff. I was in Ireland for 2 years, and then Morrison, and I think that was just a nice, safe place to go to school, fun to be at, professors that were, you know, just top notch, and I thought the classes were great, right? So from a base standpoint, it was awesome. I think the peers and our standards here was pretty high standards, so like the people in your classes were, you know, top notch, and they were driving you. And then, you know, the thing that really, when I was being thoughtful about this was the faith-based, you know, having to do theology classes as, you know, part of it. I think I was required to do 3, and I think I ended up doing 5. And I just loved it. And it was like more education for me on my faith, and it was just amazing. And then, you know, other things too, just character building, like I got to volunteer at a homeless shelter and volunteer at food shelves and things I wouldn't have done if I hadn't gone to St. Thomas. And I think it was a really character building experience and set me up, you know, for success later, so.
When Greg was referencing Ireland Hall, it's one of our oldest residence halls on campus, and I know there's several people in the room who lived in Ireland, and I talked to several people today that lived in Dowling, so I think that was character building, living in Ireland Hall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was good.
So Russ, where can people go, as you know, you have a diverse audience here, where can people go to learn more about support, incentives, and programs for military-friendly businesses?
Well, someplace we've provided that list, and we've actually made a woman that's on Christina's team. Christina is with me. She's our Chief People Officer. She is a St. Thomas graduate. But there's a woman on Christina's team. Her name is Laura Seitz, and Laura is willing to share with anybody who has interested in where we recruit and where we find where we find veterans and spouses. I'd say the place that we started first with was Hiring Our Heroes, which is affiliated with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they have a number of different hiring fairs all across the country. Fortunate, I'm a hockey guy, and just for you Tommies, just so you know, Michigan Tech's going to end your season this weekend, and I might have played hockey there. So anyway, sorry, President Fisher. I mean, I just couldn't help but work that in, and but we, I know the Craig Leopold from the Minnesota Wild and Matt Maka, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Wild. So we were able to make an introduction, and they do hiring fairs at the Minnesota Wild games, and they're a very veteran-friendly organization. And so different different hiring fairs. What Greg was alluding to, there is a number of consulting companies that have recognized the fact that there's a large number of junior military officers transitioning out of the Army, all of the armed services. And so they have these hiring conferences, and you can show up at a hiring conference and you can interview 10 or 12 different, veterans right there. And usually they're at like an embassy suites, and you use your room as your office, and the list and the quality of the candidates is really high. We've had a lot of really good success using those recruiting firms. Lucas has been one. What one did you go through? Lucas. So.
Great, thank you. I know we're going to transition here to our questions from the audience. But before we do that, I would just like to ask, I know there's several veterans in the room. If you're a veteran, would you mind standing so we can recognize you and thank you for your service? Thank you, and thank you for being here today. So now we have the opportunity to take some questions from the audience. Do we have any in particular? I know Jessica has a microphone. Will come over and any questions? Otherwise, I do have a few more. Oh, yes.
This is Ray, Director of Employment Services for Veterans at State of Minnesota, DEED. Some of you know Department of Employment. My question is, post-pandemic, in your view, Russ and Greg and everyone here, how do you see the veteran population, the reaction to the pandemic? Do you see them? Do you see a change in numbers, for example? Is there an idea to increase certain services? Finally, is there also a thought to change certain things to fit the post-pandemic era, for example, hiring, interviewing, and also accommodation? Hopefully I didn't give you a confusing question.
I think that's yours, isn't it?
I wasn't trying to avoid it. There's a couple of things there. Veterans, I would say, in a post-pandemic world, and even during the course of the pandemic, I would tell you we're more resilient than most. I don't know if that makes sense, but a lot of veterans, experience combat situations, and a little old pandemic wasn't anything, that big a deal to them as it relates to, potentially being in very, very dangerous situations. And so, my experience during the pandemic and post-pandemic is that that veterans were very, very resilient group of people. I think businesses in general, like when I think about skilled labor, and API has approximately 26,000 employees, and probably 70% plus of our employees go to work in the field every day. And I use this word all through the pandemic when I talked about the men and the women that worked in the field, but they're warriors in every sense of the word. They had daycare issues and child education issues, and yet they didn't get paid unless they showed up, to work on our sites. And so the needs that we have for those people has really, I mean, the demand is growing and continuing to grow, and that's one of the biggest challenges that Christina and her folks in working to support our businesses is, you know, how do we recruit these individuals? How do we get them trained so that they can be productive? And then how can we scale that? You know, we have, you know, there's a component of our business called inspection. So like the life safety system in this building is required by law to be inspected at least once a year for functionality and operability. And we are trying to grow our inspection business by double digits every year. Well, if you're going to grow it from a sales perspective, you have to grow it from the person actually doing the inspections. And that's a skilled person and somebody that, you know, needs to have certain traits and attributes. And veterans and their spouses fit that category very, very well. And so how do we grow that? How do we accelerate? How do we recruit those people? How do we bring them, you know, into our company is something that's very, very important for us. That's like the key tenet to API's strategy as we, you know, drive the business, you know, going forward. So I see the demand, I see it high and continuing to grow. And I think there's a great spot for veterans and their spouses to fill those roles. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, Russ. Greg, did you want to add anything to that?
No, the only other thing I thought of when you were asking the question was just that every year, like, mental health becomes more and more important. So, like, as a company, you know, I went to some mental health assessment training, and it's not only for veterans, but just in the construction industry in general. So, something we're focusing on, and I think something the pandemic definitely, you know, made even more important. So,
I think if you're an employer in the audience and you're thinking about, you know, how your business can become a home for veterans, you really have to have an understanding about mental health. And veterans, even pre-pandemic, you know, many veterans were coming back with, you know, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and you have to be patient sometimes, and you have to be willing to help those individuals get help, find help, you know, in whatever way, shape, or form. You know, so like this goes back to Lee and Penny Anderson's, their generosity. But so Regions Hospital built a new mental health facility, and basically, you know, API paid for or made a significant commitment to helping to fund that. And it was specific for veterans and veterans' mental health, and because there's a significant need there, and so as an employer, you have to be eyes wide open, and you have to be willing to work with some of those individuals when they do have some challenges.
Thank you. I really want to take this opportunity to thank both Russ and Greg for being with us today. If we could just give them a round of applause. Thank you both very much. I'd also like to thank each of you for joining us here on this beautiful winter day on our first Friday in March, and we hope that you will come back for our next one in May. And please keep an eye on your email for more information about our first Friday in May. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Nice job.
Yeah, well, thank you. I turn my microphone off here.